This episode is brought to you by NordVPN. You know, it's one of my favorite products, NordVPN. I use it everywhere, all over the world. So since Alistair Campbell challenged me live on stage on our UK tour to give a snappy sales pitch for NordVPN, I have to say it's only gotten better. And that's because the results speak for themselves. NordVPN gives you ultimate protection guaranteed. They've got more than 6,700 servers in 111 countries, and you can change your virtual location super easily as when you need to. And for me, I always have my location set on the United States because I love watching American football and American baseball. But you can flip it to anywhere you want. NordVPN has unmatched speed, and it's one of the fastest VPNs out there. And I've tried a few in my time, but I keep coming back to NordVPN. And it's a one-click solution for the whole family. You can use NordVPN up to 10 devices now, which makes life a lot simpler. So sign up to NordVPN today to safely access your favorite streams from home, no matter where you are. Avoid censorship and access social media platforms wherever you are in the world. How is that for a pitch? Far better than Alistair's. Get an exclusive NordVPN deal here. Visit nordvpn.com/tripus. That's nordvpn.com/tripus. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the episode description box. Use NordVPN. I use it. I love NordVPN.
Hello and welcome to The Rest is Politics US with me, Katty K, otherwise known as the slacker who takes 1 week of holiday after 6 months.
Oh my God! Oh, but that's how you're starting. I was going to pay you a huge compliment, said that you were missed on this podcast, and
Thank
I've
you.
gone through Katty K withdrawal where I haven't said the word Katty K or those two words.
I know
about
that's
2
a
weeks.
problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. What do you want to talk about? You tell me. What are we talking about?
I mean, God, wow, where to start? There is so much news. We're going to unpack a couple of the big stories of the week. What's happening to Pete Hegseth, the nominee to be Secretary of Defense, and why that looks increasingly in jeopardy. You and I both have got some reporting on that. Joe Biden's decision to pardon his son, Hunter Biden, who was facing 2 federal cases and possibly up to 25 years in prison. We'll do more on all of the turbulence in the inner circle. Some of the nominees, Kash Patel, who the news broke last Friday, but you and I haven't had a chance to talk about that on the podcast, who's slated to become the FBI director, vowed to overhaul the FBI leaderships, also has said that he's going to target members of the media. I have spoken to one of the lawyers for people who worked in government under President Biden, who are taking, serious precautions about what they might do if there is going to be retribution, and this extraordinary moment that we're in, that we're even talking about this. And we're going to talk about how Donald Trump is kind of already acting like he's back in the Oval Office. I mean, where is Joe Biden? This question of the week: what has happened to President Joe Biden?
Well, I think he's in Africa, actually.
He may want to stay there. The way his numbers are tanking, not just amongst Republicans, but amongst Democrats as well. And quick look at how world leaders are sort of scrambling to adjust to the reality of a Trump presidency again. So should we start with Pete Hegseth, who's been up on Capitol Hill this week? He was meant to go down to Mar-a-Lago on Thursday, but canceled that trip down to see Donald Trump because he is going to try one last ditch effort. When we're recording this, by the way, Thursday morning, so it's possible that by the time you guys listen to this on Friday, he will already be out of the running. I think you and I both agree that his chances of getting nominated are pretty slim. I've just been texting with a Republican lawmaker this morning who said that he thinks his chances are 50-50. The fact that they're already talking about possible replacements for Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, I don't think is a great sign. And we can talk about one of those people who I think is interesting. But what's happened there? Why is this? I have 2 real questions. And you and I were texting earlier this week, Anthony, and you raised the question, which I think is so interesting and that I've been kind of trying to get to the bottom of. Why has Trump nominated people like Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth, who have serious kind of personal issues, are not qualified for the jobs? You could put Tulsi Gabbard in that bracket of people not qualified. with the experience necessary of running big organizations when there are, lots of people who are very loyal to Donald Trump, who believe in the MAGA agenda, who are qualified. So kind of what's going on with that? Why is he doing? What's the psychology there of Donald Trump? And what do you think Pete Hegseth's chances are at this point?
Well, I mean, there's a lot there. So I think he has no chance. And I think they've already jockeyed themselves into position to make sure that he doesn't have a chance. I think he's a relentless guy, which is admirable. And so he's going to make one more attempt. But I think there's a group of Republicans that are going to sink him. Democrats won't vote for him, of course, and there's 3 or 4 Republicans that won't vote for him. And then, as you know, what ends up happening is if I know, Katty, you and 4 other Republicans are not going to vote for him, even though I don't want to vote for him, what I'll do is say, I'll vote for him. And this way, you look like you're being more loyal to the president because you've got your other teammates are going to sink Pete Hegseth. But, Trump is in Mar-a-Lago saying a couple of things because obviously I'm still talking to people in his camp. And the first thing he's saying is, my God, his mother took him out. Okay. My God. Okay. And so he's mumbling to himself. Can you believe the mom took him out? Right. And Trump, so he's saying it.
Although his mum, Penelope, has now been on Fox News saying she loves her son and she apologized to him and he's a reformed character. So I love the fact that his mum has been brought into this process, which adds to the kind of absurdity of the whole thing.
So if you really love politics, okay, go find that YouTube clip. The poor woman.
Poor Penelope.
It was in a hostage crisis situation. The poor woman was sitting there sweating. Okay, she's trying to do a service to the country, but now she's back in there saying, "Oh no, I was just kidding. He's not a lascivious drunk and he's not a maniac." But I'm going to say 3 things about him and then something broad. Okay, number one, he was buried by Jane Mayer, and I think you know Jane.
Very good reporter from the New Yorker magazine and does a lot of this investigative reporting. And I know Jane very well. I've known her for years. She's been on the money every time. You can kind of bank her reporting.
Yeah, and so it's a well-documented story. And just as number 2 is John Tower. For those that don't remember who John Tower is, he was a senator from Texas. George Herbert Walker Bush in 1989 wanted him to be, 1988, 89, wanted him to be the Secretary of Defense. He was a drunk. He was an alcoholic. He made a pledge, the same pledge that Pete Hegseth is making right now. If I'm at the top of the Pentagon, I won't drink. That wasn't enough. His chances were sunk. And I believe Pete's chances are sunk.
And it's worth pointing out that Donald Trump, of course, doesn't drink, right?
Doesn't drink.
For him, alcohol is an issue. And he has a brother who is an alcoholic. And I think he's very averse to people who he doesn't have alcohol on Air Force One, for example. He's banned alcohol on Air Force One. So I think the drunkenness thing is a problem for him, more than the allegations of sexual abuse.
Yeah, I actually think the number one thing was the mom. Because I know Trump's personality. I know you're laughing, but I could just see Trump saying, Jesus Christ, they went after the mom's going after him, So that was it right there, okay? So that's why the Mar-a-Lago trip got canceled. But the last thing, and I think this is the most important thing, and again, I like Pete. I work with Pete at Fox News, but he should not be any more than I should be operating on somebody's brain, Katty K. He should not be the defense secretary. He's never run anything. He doesn't have procurement capabilities. He doesn't have an ability to manage an organization. You're giving him the largest sub-organization in the American government, the Pentagon. It's just an absurd thing. And so hopefully people will say that. But you said something else that I want to address, which is, why is he putting up these people that are not qualified? And there's an answer to that. He is Captain Ahab, and he caught the whale. He caught the great white whale. The great white whale is his base, and it's MAGA, and he wants to chum that whale. And so what he's doing is he's taking chum, Pete Hegseth, Matt Gaetz, he's taking Tulsi Gabbard, and he's throwing chum in the water to feed the whale. And by the way, if the whale eats the chum, that's great. If the whale doesn't eat the chum, that is also no problem for Donald Trump. He is not out on the airwaves. He's not out on Truth Social defending this person. I'll take you back to the Kavanaugh situation when Ryan Kavanaugh was up for the confirmation in the Senate for the Supreme Court. Trump was helping him. Trump was working on it. Trump was using then Twitter, not Truth Social. He hasn't done that for any of these people. I don't expect him to do that for any of these people. And this is really him saying, hey, I'm going to throw some chum in the water for my base. And if these guys get approved by the Senate, great. If they don't get approved by the Senate, I'm moving on, as he did with Matt Gaetz. And by the way, I just want to give you this one piece because I got this from a senator, which I think is very interesting. They are tightening the noose. They see him as a lame duck president. They see him as having one more consequential election. That's 2026. After that, no mas for Donald Trump. One senator said to me, hey, in 5 years, I'll be running for re-election. Donald Trump will be in the rearview mirror. Okay. And so I don't care about Donald Trump the way he thinks I should care about.
I think that's interesting. It's always good to have the reporting on that. I texted with this member of Congress this morning, a Republican who was the one that said that he thought he had a 50-50 chance of getting in. And one of the names, I mean, this is always when in Washington, when things are going badly, when the possible other names are already being mentioned. And we're hearing that Ron DeSantis could be a possible pick. Joni Ernst, who is the senator from Iowa, Republican senator from Iowa, who is herself a combat veteran, who met with Pete Hegseth on Wednesday and came out of it and kept saying, was being asked by reporters. One of the things that people perhaps don't understand about Washington is the great thing about Washington and Capitol Hill is that any reporter can just go up there. Any member of the public can go up there. You can get into any Senate building. You can get into any House building, and you can just walk down the corridors with a microphone. And if there is a member of Congress or a senator, you can stick a microphone in their faces and they can't get away from you. So you've got all of these reporters surrounding Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa, and asking her, how did the meeting go with Pete Hegseth? Because she is seen as critical in this voting process because she is a former member of the armed services herself. And she's saying that it was thorough and frank. Well, thorough and frank is code for this was a bad meeting that did not go well for Pete Hegseth. I didn't think he was great. I mean, and that's all she would say, thorough and frank, thorough and frank, thorough and frank. But she would also ask, look, could you be the possible Secretary of Defense if Pete Hegseth doesn't make it? And this member of Congress texted me and said, look, she has to play this very carefully because she can't be seen as the person that kills his nomination. So she can't say anything about that. She would be a very good Secretary of Defense. She actually has the qualifications to be Secretary of Defense. You could trust Joni Ernst with the nuclear codes. I think she is a nominee who would actually get bipartisan support. You'd get some Democrats voting for her, which in this particular Washington moment would be pretty remarkable. So once you start naming the other names, I think the chances of Hegseth making this is very slim. I think it's worth pointing out the competency stuff. There's been so much focus on the drinking, on the womanizing, on some of the things he said about women. But there's something else that I read that he said on Fox and Friends in June of 2020, and it was during the Black Lives Matter protests. And he was talking about the protests, and he said, the question is, do you send in the troops? Do you say, hey, this isn't going to happen anymore? Or do you let Seattle sort of implode on itself? And then he compared it to kind of, looking after a wayward child and how you would discipline them. And he said, it's the idea of you caught your kid with cigarettes underage. Do you take them away right away, or do you force them to smoke every cigarette in front of you in the entire pack to learn the lesson of what's not going to work? And I think that kind of video, what he's saying there about the idea of using American troops on American people, which I know that a lot of people in the military have real concerns about. And I have heard from contacts in the Pentagon that you have soldiers saying, we're not going to do this. If we are sent out into the American streets because of legitimate protests, we're not going to start firing on them. We feel very uncomfortable with that. But just the slightly glib comparison of, how you discipline your children compared to the enormity of what that would mean for America of sending troops out on the streets, which hasn't been done since the 1960s, I think is another reason why people have concerns about Pete Hegseth beyond, and it's that competency element of this. And would this even serve the Trump agenda particularly well? Could he get the job done? So Hegseth, we agree, looking like he is in the rearview mirror. What are you hearing about the people who are concerned about what somebody like Kash Patel? We haven't had a chance to talk about Kash Patel since the news broke. Kash Patel, who Trump would like to run the FBI, who has said very clearly that he has a campaign of retribution, not just against the media, but against other people who worked in the administration, who he feels betrayed Donald Trump by working on the January the 6th investigations, for example, or working on the impeachment investigations, the Russia investigations. What do you think of Kash as a possible FBI director?
Well, I mean, he would be an unmitigated nightmare, and
okay. Just tell it how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said this publicly, and so I'm probably going to be arrested by him.
What were you? You number 48 on the list or something? I think you're just bumping yourself up to number 10.
I was 48 on his list.
You just want to get higher up the list, don't you?
I do, and I feel upset that I've done so much work on this that I'm not higher on the list. I feel like I'm not getting enough attention about this, but what I don't understand, Katty, and who is the person? Is it Susie Wiles? Is it
does Susie
one of his
Wiles
family
not have much influence? This is what I'm starting to think.
That's what I'm saying. So
Wiles?
Who's the person, Katty, that says, Mr. President, you won the election. You don't have to put up bozos, miscreants, drunkards, and incompetents in these positions. Moreover, Kash Patel's not going to serve your interests. He's going to be a ridiculous distraction to you and to your presidency. And so why are we doing this? Why can't we go with somebody sensible? Christopher Wray's done a great job. You put him in the role yourself. Nobody's bothering you from the FBI. What are you doing this for? Why are you listening to the Steve Bannon podcast? And why are you, which you know is absolutely absurd, accepting the Kash Patel proposition that he should go after and arrest people on his enemies list who are just exercising their First Amendment right to talk and to be critical or not critical of various things that go on in the American system. So who is it, Katty? Who's there saying to him, "What it's in your best interest not to do this. Why are you doing this?"
Look, this gets back to that question of why he's nominating these people and what it tells us about his state of mind and what he plans to do. And, first, don't underestimate the degree to which Donald Trump likes the way people look on television, and thinks that if they're good on television, that's what he wants. It's how he judges people. It's how he, that's effectively your resume. And Pete Hegseth fits that model. Kash Patel, he thinks, is fiery and defensive of him on television and on podcasts. He likes that about him. I think there's a degree to which he's flexing. He feels he's won this massive mandate. And we should point out at this point, the mandate is looking less big at this point than it looked the week after the election. The Republicans are facing the prospect of a 1-seat majority in the House of Representatives. That is tiny. It's not a massive victory in the history of massive victories in America. I think he's challenging the Republican establishment and what is left of the establishment Republican Party in the Senate. He wants to see if they're going to defy them. He's kind of challenging them not to defy him. The charitable version is that he actually believes these are the best people to shake up the American system that he thinks is corrupt and bloated and inefficient. And he actually believes that Tulsi Gabbard can do that with the intelligence community, that Pete Hegseth could do that with the Department of Defense, and Kash Patel could do that with the FBI. There are people in the MAGA movement who would like to get rid of the FBI completely and see the FBI as being complicit in the impeachment investigations against him. And the FBI has become, to the extent that some FBI members have had to have security of their own, that the FBI has become a kind of tool of the Democrats, which is sort of ironic when you think of the history of the FBI and many of the FBI agents I've come across who are probably card-carrying Republican voters. But the FBI has become a target of them. I guess, I mean, those are my thoughts on why he wants to do this. And I think you're right, he'll kind of move on very quickly. I do have, there are people who worked in the establishment who were career appointees, right? The vice president's, one of the former vice president Mike Pence's national security advisors, Olivia Troy, who is probably even higher on the list than you are. She has gone on television. She has spoken out against Kash Patel. She has said publicly that Kash Patel would lie about intelligence in a way that endangered intelligence operatives abroad, that he would make things up about US intelligence operations that put members of the intelligence community at risk. Kash Patel actually on Wednesday launched a lawsuit against her for defamation for saying that. I suspect that might make his job harder. It looks a little hot-headed. I don't know that members of the Republican Party in the Senate who work in intelligence are going to particularly like that. I think they have real reservations about Kash Patel becoming the next head of the FBI. But I think that's the question of the moment. The question of the moment is why he's doing this. Why he is putting people in place who probably won't get confirmed and are not actually the most competent people for the job.
I just think that he has the drumbeat. Like, I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit this to you, but I do listen to it. Do you listen to Steve Bannon's podcast, The War Room? Do you listen to it?
I have listened to it. I don't make it regular listening, but I probably should do.
I have to listen to it because I did work with this son of a bitch, and I did work on the transition team with him in 2016. I did work on the campaign with him, and I think he's the craziest, most malevolent, most evil person that I have interacted with in my lifetime. And and I told Alistair this, that the reason why I believe in God is I think that God made Bannon so ugly to protect the civilization from Steve Bannon. He's got the skin products by Blotch and the contemporary hobo look and this, that, and another thing. But he's a very smart, very charismatic guy, very well read. And he's decided that he wants to wall off America physically and literally and metaphorically from the rest of the world. And I will just say this to you, when I listen to the podcast, I say that is how Donald Trump thinks. Now, he can't articulate it the way Steve can. Donald Trump is not a literate guy. He's a very smart guy. He's got great political instincts. He's a very hard worker, but he's not a well-read guy. Okay, he may have had Minecraft on his bedstand, but he probably didn't read it. Just thought it was funny to have it there because he's a little bit of a nut. There was a joke on the campaign in 2016 that Trump has written more books than he's actually read, because of course he had a great ghostwriter writing these books for him. But I'm making the point that Bannon is in Trump's ear, and Bannon is pushing this agenda. Bannon is pushing the deep state is evil. Everyone that works in the American government is evil. They're either slackers or evil. And it's a big bloated system that needs to be destroyed by the Donald Trumps and the Kash Patels that now have an opportunity to try to destroy it.
Even though, by the way, the American government, the civil service, number of people employed in the American government is barely any bigger today than it was under Ronald Reagan, even though the American population is bigger. So some of this is myth making about the civil service.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also, we have to blame somebody. You're unhappy you're unhappy with your life. I've got to blame somebody. I've got to scapegoat somebody. So I will just say this to you, that I believe that the president is going to get shot down on a couple of these ridiculous nominations. And I believe that he's not going to care. I think Trump is in a different spot today in 2024 than he was in 2016. I think he's looked at this and said, I've won. I'm not going to jail. My buddies that have feathered my nest, I'm going to put them in spots. Charlie Kushner, I mean, he set up a prostitute to go after his sister's
Jared Kushner's father, who went to prison
husband.
for doing this.
Yeah, went to prison. Chris Christie prosecuted
Such
him.
a great cast of characters.
Trump
so sort of wholesome.
Yeah, Trump pardoned him. Now he's going to be the ambassador to France. Okay, God bless.
Maybe the French will like that.
I'm just saying to you that Trump is a weird dude. The American people want Trump to be the president. The Democrats, unfortunately, they didn't give the American people a lot of choices. Again, I'm not criticizing Vice President Harris. I'm just saying you gave her 107 days. I did think that she could pull it off in 107 days because of the craziness around Trump, but obviously she couldn't. He's got 4 years here, but he's not going to be able to do any of the things that they're suggesting. We can talk about Doge.
We should do it. We'll do an episode on that, because I'm increasingly thinking that he's not going to get much of this done.
Not going to get much of it done. And so, but he's not going to care. That's the thing that people don't.
He doesn't, yeah. He's not an ideologue. He
is going to go play golf. He's going to wear the 47 hat and he's going to run around with the Secret Service. He's going to play golf. He's going to hang out with Putin, and he's going to go talk to different people. He's going to Notre Dame this weekend to see the opening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. And got and I'm just letting you know that these people are not getting in. The Republicans are going to surprise people. They're shape-shifting on Trump right now, and they're looking at 28 and 32, and there will be no Donald Trump unless you tell me that Donald Trump's going to be successful in changing the Constitution and getting himself another term at age 82, which I don't think he's going to be successful at doing that, Katty. So for me, I'm watching this. I'm saying, wow, Trump won. He's not going to get done what he wants. And is he or is he not going to care? And the answer is he's not going to care.
I did have a very interesting conversation this week with the lawyer who is representing and advising some of the people who are on that hit list, who worked in the administration, who worked on the national security side. And he's actually advising some of them to be out of the country on Inauguration Day in case Donald Trump issues executive orders trying to round them up or trying to prosecute them in some sort of way. Now, the chances of that happening, and the lawyer himself said, actually, given the sort of, given the stumbles that Donald Trump is making with these nominees, makes him think that actually this is a less formidable operation than we all thought it was going to be. There's a lot of reporting saying he's much more organized, he's much more efficient. Susie Wiles has got this down. And actually, you look at Matt Gaetz and you look at Pete Hegseth fiascos, and you kind of think, well, actually, no, maybe this is the chaos it always was with Trump. But it was interesting. I mean, I just think it's worth reiterating that we are in a moment in American history where a lawyer is advising people who worked in the civil service, who worked for Vice President Mike Pence, to be out of the country on Inauguration Day in case the retribution takes place and these people are put under arrest. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen. This lawyer himself says, maybe I'm being overcautious. But the very fact that we live in a country at a moment where people are being told, you may not be safe, you have to leave the country, is in itself extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, this is why he was disqualifying to run this government, to run this prestigious, enormous, beautiful experiment in world history. But the American people have spoken. So if he starts to do that, I do think there will be a lot of clapback. But let me ask you this question. If you were on that list, and let's say you weren't 48 like me, Katty K, but you were in the top 10, and a lawyer called you and said, you got to get out of the country, would you get out of the country?
I think I might. Yeah, I think I might possibly just be on vacation in London or Athens on that day. Why not? Why take the risk?
Okay.
Why take the risk? So, these people, and this gets us to the Hunter Biden thing, because these people have not committed crimes. Nobody has charged them with anything. They were doing their jobs. They were taking part in investigations as part of their jobs. I have never heard any suggestion that Olivia Troy, for example, committed a crime. But you can hear from the other side, and I think this gets us to the Hunter Biden issue. You can hear already from the Trump people, well, they used the Justice Department against us. The Justice Department has been politicized. They went after Donald Trump. It was unfair. It was lawfare, the phrase you have used before. And they will say that's exactly the same as what Joe Biden is now doing with Hunter Biden. He is using the Justice Department to his own ends. He is making the process political. And I think that is why so many Democrats are very unhappy publicly. I mean, unusually, you have senators and members of Congress and people in the Democratic leadership very publicly saying they're not happy with what Joe Biden did in pardoning Hunter Biden, because it takes away the argument for, and it's not equal. This is not apples and apples. This is apples and oranges. But it gives the Democrats a harder case when they try to say Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Look what he's doing. In 2 years' time, if Donald Trump really is rounding people up, it's going to be harder for Democrats to say he's using the Justice Department for political ends, because pardoning Hunter Biden is a political act, is using the Justice Department for his own personal reasons. I get it as a parent. I get it. I have sons. I would never want a son who's been dealing with addiction. You don't want them to go to prison where there are drugs and alcohol in American prisons. But he'd said, I mean, maybe if he'd not said adamantly again and again on tape, I'm not going to pardon him, that would be one thing. But pardoning him now,
I always thought he was going to pardon him. I even when he said he wasn't going to pardon him.
So he shouldn't have said he wasn't going to pardon him.
Yeah,
right?
He shouldn't have said he was going to pardon him, but he would have been better off pardoning him in August. He thought it was a political football then, but he would have been better off saying, "Hey, this is my son. I put him through hell. He lost his mother in a car crash when I was 29 years old. He lost his brother. He's got huge problems. Yes, he's made mistakes, but you know what? I'm the president of the United States. He's my son. I have this ability to do this. I'm doing it. And if anybody has an issue with it, come see me. But I'm doing it." It would have been a 1 week news story, and it would have been over. When Roger Clinton was pardoned by Bill Clinton in the year, I guess it was 1999 or 2000, maybe it was January of 2000. Nobody really cared. They
But Roger Clinton had already served his time.
Yeah,
right. That was forgiveness. This is getting Hunter Biden out of prison. And this argument that, well, he was only targeted because his name is Biden, and that the Trump administration will treat him unfairly. The sentencing will be extra harsh because his name is Biden. I understand that, and there may be some truth in that. But Hunter Biden got the job at Burisma, advising Burisma and the money from Burisma, because his name was Biden as well. This works both ways. I mean, the only reason he was useful to that oil and gas company in Ukraine was because he was close to President Biden.
But remember, Katty, he also gave him a all-encompassing pardon all the way back to 2014, which knocked out his brother, Joe Biden's brother, and frankly also knocked out Joe Biden. So if the Trump people went after Hunter Biden for the Burisma thing, he effectively checkmated the Trump people, because Trump is upset about the Ukrainian impeachment. And that's why a guy like Elon Musk is saying that this man Vindman is going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Of course, he was the whistleblower on the Trump situation when Trump was delaying arms shipments to the Ukrainians pursuant to the security agreement that we've had with the Ukrainians. And so there's a big thing going on right now. Is Trump going to go back and rehash the past and dig up on these people and go after these people?
Is he actually going to do it?
Is he actually going to do it? Yeah. And so, but you've said something. But you've said something on this podcast. You said you would be out of the country. And so I just want you to think about this. You've lived in Washington for 25 years. And you said if you were in the top 10 on that enemies list, you would find a way to be out of the country to see how things were going to go. And that tells you that we have a problem in the country. That tells you that there's a serious problem now in the country where there's a group of people that want to hijack and stress this system. I can guarantee you if you said things about Vice President Harris and she won this election, there'd be nobody talking to lawyers about leaving the country. Same with Joe Biden. Same with, you pick the Jeb Bush.
Well, when Joe Biden won in 2020, there was nobody on the Republican side saying, I might have to be out of the country. I mean, that's not the way. I've covered so many transitions. That's not the way this works. And it is those kind of lower level people that are worried. And one of the things they're worried about is their passports could be revoked on day one, and that would stop them from leaving the country. So if they need to, they wouldn't be able to get out, which is part of the reason they're thinking of leaving. But the higher level people, there's also some reporting out, reliable reporting out this week that Biden is considering preemptive pardons for people like Liz Cheney, Dr. Fauci, and others, senior figures, Liz Cheney and Dr. Fauci, so that they could not be prosecuted by the Trump administration. I don't know if people like Cheney and Fauci want preemptive pardons, because that might imply they've committed a crime, which nobody has ever suggested they did. But those people could be protected by media scrutiny. They're high profile. I think it's these kind of lower level people that are thinking they seriously need to take precautions because they're not household names.
I'm so upset about this. I just have to tell you, as a human being, somebody that's read the Constitution, somebody that's has a love affair with this country, and somebody that sees the country as a welcoming country culturally to other people. I spoke at an event yesterday for a group of young entrepreneurs that are building businesses in this country. 50% of those people, Katty, are born outside of this country, moved to this country to start their businesses. And they were all in their 20s and 30s. And the notion that we are now going to upend this culture, that we're going to make people fear their government, or we're going to challenge the rights in the Bill of Rights that these people have. I don't think people understand the consequence of this. And I've said this to you, and I'll say it one more time briefly. The freedom of the press creates the economic innovation. You teach a second grader that they can speak and think freely. They go on to create Facebook and Apple Computer, and they go on and create Bitcoin. They engineer things, they build things, they think broadly. If you tell somebody that they can't talk about Kash Patel or their dear leader, Donald Trump, like they do in other countries, if you're in China, you say something wrong about the leadership, they send you to a re-education camp. So they have to steal our intellectual property, Kat. And so what people have to understand is that First Amendment right is not only there to hold people accountable, but it's there to create this massive amount of economic innovation. It's just very, very upsetting to me.
Yeah, I think it's a real question now. Is America's exceptional experiment in democracy looking a little less exceptional in 2024?
And I want to end this on an upbeat note, if you don't mind. I'm just very happy that you're not on the enemies list like me and Olivia Troy. Okay, see that? You'll be able to stay in your beautiful house in DC. And by the way, I'm not going anywhere, so I may be talking to you from jail, which is fine.
Yeah, I hope that you just save up all of those phone minutes that you're allowed in federal prison to use on the podcast. Okay, can we just get that on the record?
Yes, I'll be trading with my fellow inmates their time, so I can speak with you and the rest as politics people.
I did tweet out this week, or blue skied out. I'm on Blue Sky now, and I blue skied out that this week has reminded me of covering the first Trump administration and just how there is so much news and so much of it is crazy that keeping on top of it all is very hard. And I get back to that thing I said a couple of weeks ago, which is we need to judge Trump by what he does, not what he says. But this week we've had a reminder of that kind of diplomacy by tweet, with Donald Trump tweeting out things like there's going to be all hell to pay if the Gaza hostages are not released by January the 20th, which is Inauguration Day. And the way he kind of tweets things that then puts allies and countries that have to deal with Donald Trump in this sort of, what are we doing? How do we manage him? And I think I've had a couple of very interesting conversations over the last week with people talking about how do allies and even adversaries deal with Donald Trump. I mean, his whole madman theory Nixonian theory of foreign policy that everybody in the world is going to be so afraid that I might go crazy and launch a nuclear missile or put 100% tariffs on that they're going to fall into line. I actually think if you look around the world this week, we've had democracy challenged in South Korea. Ukraine has heated up, not cooled down. The Middle East, with the incursion by rebels in Syria, heated up, not cooled down. There isn't much indication over the last week that even the prospect of Donald Trump becoming president has suddenly made the world a calmer place.
So, I mean, so much there, but I got to ask you these questions. Okay. So, question number one, it's a Hatch Act violation for a private citizen to engage in foreign policy.
Yeah. And he's been doing that ever since he was elected. I was going to ask you, how's he getting away with this?
So, let me just say this to you, and then I'm going to ask you the question. So, in 2016, Shinzo Abe came to Trump Tower. I had the opportunity to meet the prime minister, and he had a whole delegation from Japan. And then we went into a big conference room, and the president-elect was talking with him. The very next day, Barack Obama called Donald Trump, and he said, "Mr. President-elect, out of respect for the protocol and respect for the system."
Sounds almost quaint.
"Could you not meet with any more foreign leaders until the inauguration? I understand that they're going to call you and say congratulations and so on and so forth, but could you not have this sort of shadow diplomacy going on until you get the job?" And Donald Trump at that moment said respectfully, yes, no problem. And so there were several meetings that we canceled as a result of that conversation. So here we are now.
Not so much this time around.
Yeah. So, but why is Joe Biden like, no problem with that? And why is nobody calling him on that? Because again, it's there's a broken windows theory to these things, right? And so when I worked for Mayor Giuliani, Commissioner Bratton, who was the police commissioner, said, "We got to fix all of the broken windows here in this area. It'll send a message to people that we're serious about crime by focusing on the petite things." And so this is a small thing. It's not a very large thing, but it is just one more dent in the breaking down of the institutional processes and the respect for the system in America.
I love the way you phrase that. I hadn't thought of that, Anthony. And it's so, it gets a little bit back to what we were saying about how strong the system is, that part of democracy is rules, but part of democracy is norms and traditions. And this is a norm and tradition, although in this case, there is the Hatch Act. It is actually a rule. But so far, Donald Trump has met with Javier Milei of Argentina. He's met with Justin Trudeau of Canada. He will meet with Emmanuel Macron of France this weekend. So that's 3 foreign leaders he's met with in person. He's also spoken, we know, with Putin, Sheinbaum, Orban. He's spoken with all of those people. And like you say, maybe phone calls is one thing and meetings is another. But it is a very unusual transition, again, in this respect, that Joe Biden has been in Brazil and is now, this week, has been in Africa and has been quiet. And Donald Trump is acting effectively like he's already president. And the power you can see even from foreign leaders around the world, there was that kind of rather embarrassing moment at the G7 meetings in Brazil where Joe Biden was almost sidelined, because you can tell allies and adversaries alike are totally focused on Donald Trump. And it is kind of unusual, and it's affecting the way that foreign countries are thinking, how do we deal with this? I'll just take a small example. Karen Pierce, who's the UK ambassador to the United States, was due to leave at the beginning of next year. She's been asked by the Labour government to stay on in place because she has good relationships with the Trump people. They had been planning to put in a kind of Labour stalwart, somebody like David Miliband, for example, or Peter Mendelsohn, into the ambassador's office. That was into the ambassador's residence here. They've given up that idea. I mean, I think everybody is just scrambling because Trump is such an extraordinary president when it comes to foreign policy. They're kind of scrambling to think, how do they deal with him? I don't know. I mean, it's a good question why Biden is not calling him on this. I mean, I think that why are the Democrats so quiet on so much of this at the moment? I mean, they're not they're not jumping on some of these extreme appointments. They're not calling out Pete Hegseth for being not qualified, or Tulsi Gabbard for not being qualified to run the National Intelligence Department. I mean, it's like the Democrats generally have gone into this defensive crouch since the election, and they kind of need to find a way to fight back, because at the moment they're not doing anything. They are Joe Biden on down. There's like, you did this the other day. Where's Joe Biden? Is he under my desk? Is he? No, I didn't do it as well as you. But it's not JD Vance. It's Joe Biden we're looking for.
I really like that, by the way, because I was like, what the hell is she doing?
But it wasn't as good. I'm not as good an actor as you are.
It worked. It worked because, I thought it worked. But here's the thing I would say to you, and please react to this. I'm going to beat you down. I'm Donald Trump, and I'm going to beat you down. I'm going to break your norms. I'm going to break your system to the point where I'm going to normalize what I'm doing. And I'm going to anesthetize you from all of these micro breaches of the system. So when I breach it in a big way, okay, you're going to be, I can't fight them. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some of the kind of, you mean it's a sort of the bully in the playground analogy, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That you feel so cowed on everything. And the Democrats actually have spent much of the last week fighting amongst themselves, which probably is exactly what Donald Trump wants them to be doing. And they are still figuring it out. And yet they have reasons this week, not just the appointments, but they have not lost by a lot in the House of Representatives. They can be more robust in their response, I think, but they just don't. Donald Trump has taken that. Maybe they were just caught so by surprise that Donald Trump took the wind out of their sails and they haven't recovered it yet.
So I have to say this as a point of leadership, and again, please react to it. If I were advising one of these people, which of course I'm not, but I would say, hey guys, why don't you wake up? It's 1,461 days. That is the Trump presidency. So it's going to start on January 20th, and it's going to end on 2029, January 20th. It's 1,461 days, or 132 Scaramucci's, because I just divided that by 11. But let me ask you this. If I was your advisor, I'd be saying, hey, what the hell are you guys doing? Fight back. This guy is going to be a lame, but this guy is going to depreciate the way that new car comes off the lot on the first day. And if you're a world leader, pay attention. It's 4 years. Wait him out. Think like the Chinese do. If you're a congressman, get on your front foot and say, hey, there's a new Republican Party coming. It's going to be very, very different from this party. We don't have to slouch our way downward into MAGAism. And you could be at the top of the heap if you hit this thing differently than people expect. It's only 1,461 days. What's your reaction to that?
And it's less than that if you take in the midterms, when the Democrats will have the chance to take back the House of Representatives.
730 days.
I love your maths that you
730
days.
You
do this. And how many Scaramucci's is that, since we like to put this in terms of Scaramucci's?
Yeah, so that would be 66.4.
Excellent. Okay, good. We can bring it back.
But just think about it, Katty, for a second. Okay,
yeah,
that's all it is.
It's not very much time. I know.
This guy is 78 years old.
And it's not that they have nothing, right? They almost had the House of Representatives.
Guys,
a lot of people voted for them.
You almost won the election. It's not a mandate. You've got
and start acting like that.
What are you guys doing? Snap out of it.
So can I, just to get this back to the rest of the world, because I had one person who is being robust and who is thinking long term. I interviewed the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, the new Secretary General of NATO, earlier this week, and I asked him, what he thought of some of the plans that are being floated about giving the occupied parts of Ukraine NATO status, so they're protected, and long-term prospects for Ukraine joining NATO. And he is actually somebody who is being remarkably robust at the moment. And I was interested to hear him say, and what he replied is, listen, we should not be even having these conversations about breaking the country up. We should be having conversations about keeping up our support for Ukraine. And by the way, and he didn't mention the Trump administration, but his message kind of to the United States and to critics of supporting Ukraine is, don't think this is just about Russia and Ukraine. If Russia manages to take any part of Ukraine in a formal way, that is a win for President Xi. There is an arc at the moment between Iran, North Korea, and China, and they are all watching what is happening in Ukraine. And I was just interested, as everybody is kind of tiptoeing around Donald Trump, it was kind of, I was just struck by how forceful Mark Rutte was on what's happening with Ukraine. And I think, I was interested in your conversation last week with Alistair, and one of the things that Alistair said about hearing a European official talk about how there's more nuance in the Trump administration around Ukraine now than people had thought. And if you look at who he's nominated for his Ukraine envoy, Keith Kellogg.
He's the Ukraine envoy?
The envoy, yeah. Keith Kellogg. If you look at who he's nominated for Ukraine envoy, Keith Kellogg, actually Kellogg has a plan which would potentially involve more American aid for Ukraine. If Donald Trump puts a peace proposal on the table and the Russians reject it, Kellogg has said that he would advise at boosting American military support for Ukraine. So it's not that you have a kind of, Donald Trump's position, I think, on Ukraine is one of the more interesting ones, as Alistair was saying last week, to watch. And it's not necessarily that he's going to sell out Ukraine on day one, as he has suggested. And I just think it's interesting that he chose somebody to be Ukraine envoy who is not ruling out more aid to Ukraine.
What do you say to the David Saxes, David is a billionaire, Silicon Valley billionaire, big supporter of Donald Trump, helped Donald Trump break into the Silicon Valley network of VCs, always uses Russian talking points related to the Ukraine and so forth. And so what does Trump say to those people? And what do you think Trump comes out on the Ukraine? Is he, is it the fear that the Democrats have that he's going to let Putin partition it and he's going to sign executive orders to more or less take the U.S. out of NATO? Is he doing that? Or is he going to go in the opposite direction? And remember, he met with the incoming NATO president. That's another violation of the Hatch Act. He met with the incoming NATO president in Mar-a-Lago. And, we both know that he's susceptible to flattery and so forth. Does he really want to pull the U.S. out of NATO? Remember, he's 78 years old. He won the election. He won the popular vote. It's still the most powerful military in the world, the strongest economy. Does he need to cow to Vladimir Putin, or can he flex on Vladimir Putin?
I'm watching what Putin is doing around the world this week, supporting Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And Putin is kind of very much setting himself up against US interests globally. And I don't think Donald Trump wants to be seen as the person, as you've said before, who is the lackey to Vladimir Putin. And I just think it's interesting that he's nominated somebody as Ukraine envoy who takes a more robust position than the totally isolationist position. You look at Marco Rubio, you've said this as well. Marco Rubio, not a isolationist, a more traditional Republican, America should be a leader in the world politician. And on that side of things, you've got people who want American engagement, who would not want America to pull out of NATO, who still want America to be the leader in the world. And I just think that for Donald Trump, being seen as the leader who sold the West out to Vladimir Putin is not necessarily what he wants. And I think we are seeing in the tea leaves of who he's appointing. And that's why we're talking so much about these nominees this week, is because this is giving us an indication. Policy is personnel. As you've always said, as I've always said, it's who you appoint, and who he's appointing are much more traditional in this respect than the let's get out on day one.
All right, so we'll have to see. But I'm sitting here thinking that it could go wrong, Katty. There could be a group of people getting arrested. There could be a level of insanity in the country. There could be a level of insanity in our overseas relationships, or we're going to be sitting here in 3 months saying, wow, interesting. Somebody asked me, make a prediction for 2025 that would startle people. And I thought about it, and my prediction was Donald Trump creates a path for the Ukraine to join NATO. And people are like, what are you talking about? He's never going to do that. But he might do that. He might do that because, again, it would fit who Donald Trump is, this unpredictable, reflexive contrarian. He may be sitting there saying, you know what? 78, U.S. president, I'm going to let the Ukraine join me. Might happen. We'll have to see.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. On that cliffhanger, I'm Katty Kay. Thanks for listening. And of course, for our founding members, Anthony and I will be back on Saturday with a special bonus episode just for you guys, where we're going to take some of your amazing questions.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.